Special Report.
Black holes are one of the strangest things in existence.
Neil Armstrong may have seen extraterrestrials on the moon.
When he spies a discernible shape.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there. And no one, no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
Oh, welcome to Full Spectrum Universe. My name is Rob Yox. We are the Embattled broadcast from behind enemy lines. What a great night. It is a Friday night. We are here. We're hanging out. We've got a lot more information to go over today, so we're going to try and speed into it. But first, I have to say this disclaimer for a reason, right? So a lot of what we see in some of these areas of research is these abilities to use indicators. When I say indicator, I'm talking about to basically describe a specific person or types of entity. We see a lot of the same reoccurring themes, right? So when I tell you that we're going to be talking about Lucifer, we're going to be talking about the Creator, we're going to be talking about angels, archangels, I don't want you to keep that in the context of Catholicism or Christianity. And I say that because it is basically a description of a specific being. We're also going to be talking about heaven, but it's not the heaven in which you know from the Bible. And this is why I have to preface this first, because it may sound like a sermon at times, but it's really, really not. What we're doing is we're describing specific entities. And when we describe these entities, we now know that they stand at this density, at that density. When we talk about things like heaven, we're talking about different densities as we go up, right? So I say that to say this. A lot of people I've actually gotten a few comments about a lot of the divisiveness of what we talk about and how it is a little bit on the darker side. And it's not without warning, right? The reason why we go over this stuff is to make sure that we don't repeat these same mistakes again. And, you know, I actually had a comment the other day that some guy was like, oh, you're compromised, yada, 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 such and such. And I'm just like, wow, man, some people are really not open to new information or to see a collaboration of information. So, you know, this essentially is just a grand archive of works being spoken out. A lot of this stuff is not even my own research, and that's the crazy part. But I digress because, again, disclaimer, when we talk about specific entities that you know them for what they are being talked about in the mainstream today, we have to let those barriers down and kind of see it from a 40,000-foot view as opposed to a finite Christian view. And I want to make sure I say that because we're going to go into the description of some of these entities, and it's going to you're going to understand why I'm saying this in just a few moments. So let's jump right into the information because that's what we're all here for. I've already taken up 4 minutes of not talking about info. Let's get into it. So this specific episode is in the War in the Heavens and the Maldek and Mars Wars. And you're going to say to yourself, why would we be talking about both of those wars? Because they coincide with each other. The war in heaven is an upper density war that bleeds into the Maldek Mars war, right? So when we're talking about this stuff, everything has a reaction or a action and a consequence, I guess is the best way to put it. And it trickles down through the densities. So if something happens at the 11th density, from the 10th density to the 2nd density is going to have an effect. It's a ripple effect. And it's wild, okay? So we're going to get into that a little bit more too. Forgot to say this, though. Please share this out. It's imperative that we get this information out to as many people who are looking for it. And I say that because we're truly waking the world up together, right? Not just us here, but everybody that's doing work right now and putting their information on the table is doing work that is trying to empower humanity. And I say that because right after this episode, if you go over to Watchers Talk, which is also on YouTube, you're going to watch one of my best friends, Omar, go over Saturn and the symbolism of Saturn and the consistency we see of Saturn and this satanic sort of royal bloodline that we're going to talk about in here tonight. So it's very similar in the sense that some of the stuff we touch on here is going to be talked about over there, and I know it because I've heard this specific presentation before, and it's empowering, right? It really is. And once you see the symbolism, it's going to blow your mind. So let's get back to the information at hand. So we start. In order to understand the war in the heavens, first, we have to establish both what is meant by heaven, who and what principal players were actually there, and in popular mythology, heaven is often envisioned as a place of billowing white clouds and streaming sunlight, and sure, it can be that, but it's what the inhabitants desire, in fact, that it could be like that. So anything can be heaven in the sense of heaven simply means the sixth and seventh density, right? So you see this picture that's up right now. This is one of those puffy white clouds. We're looking at heaven. Doesn't mean that this is exactly what heaven is. It's perceived the sixth and seventh density, which is the ability to manipulate the reality around you in an etherical way, in a spiritual way, in a physical way, right? So when we talk about heaven, that's what we mean. Now, also, when you reach that sixth and seventh density, you lose the duality of man or the polarity of that good and evil, right? Usually, most people are either one or the other in the sixth density. And believe it or not, love is our ability to get to those densities because that's the path of the righteous, right? That's not the path of the wicked who are servers to self. And those wicked people still have access to the sixth and seventh density and beyond, right? Now, it's weird we say that, and it's kind of, it takes you back a little bit because you're like, wait a minute, if they're servers to self, how are they getting there, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with information or the ability to be in the knowing, right? So for us, it's different than some of these entities that also started at fifth density, sixth density. They started like that as well. So let's keep going, right? So we're going to be talking about the players in the sixth and seventh density that is the war in heaven, right? The first archetypes that we see, as we can see, are the divine archetypes, the masculine, the feminine principles, right? That's the feminine and masculine principles, the heart, Christ energy, and the body, all encompassed in these pictures. But this is what we're talking about when we talk about the entities that reside in the sixth and seventh density, aka heaven. And it's when we start talking about Lucifer and the angels, we're going to get into exactly how they were created, right? It's not just going to be like, hey, here's some angels, that's it, right? These angels or these perceived light beings have been known as the Patel, right? The ascended masters are there as well. And we're going to get into it, but we have the angels. There's the archangels, and then there's the angels. And I tried to find the least Christianized version of these entities to show as a picture. They are light. They are not physical. They are in the etherical. Now, there are some that are more powerful than others, and they're light beings, so we can call them light beings, right? So these ones that are a little bit more powerful are radiating more light than the regulars are the archangels, and the ones that are just radiating light at a base level within that sixth and seventh density are the angels. So I want to make sure that we understand this. This is not This is only used as an indicator to tell the story. Okay. So just so we're all on the same page here. So the angels, these are the immortal manifestations of the divine eternal beings of light with vast intelligence and power. A lot of these creatures or these entities were created from the Father. The Father has created a lot of these beings. And when they talk about the Creator, they're talking about the Mother and the Father, not just the Father, right? And that's one of the things that we have to really step into, right? Is there is this divine masculine and divine feminine, and they are coexisting. They used to be unity consciousness before they separated, right? Before they were playing out their innermost fantasies, and electricity and magnetism ripped them apart. And then they yearned for each other. When they found each other, they stayed with each other. So we also have the next ones on the list are the ascended masters, right? These are the Patel. The Patel are also seen as angels sometimes, but they are not. These are incarnates who have ascended the sixth density and act as great guides and teachers for all of creation. These are the ones that are more adept at going into different densities and interacting with them, right? So when I say that the ascended masters are not angels, some of the angels can be ascended masters. It's not mutually exclusive to each other. There's a lot of bleed through with this, right? Another entity that we're going to be talking about is Lucifer, right? So Lucifer, again, was created by the Father when some of Father's energy went to the void. He was hanging out with these energies that were of the negative, and decided that he was going to come back out into the known universe and try and interact with such entities as with such extraterrestrials as the Dracos and things like that. But after a lot of this had failed, Lucifer had pulled away. He had pulled away and tried to get back into Father's good graces. And when he did do that, Father and Mother came to the decision to make him a archangel because of his inherently terrible upbringing, or the reason that how he was created and the trauma around that. They thought by giving him another chance that he would be able to kind of fulfill his righteousness in their pantheon, right? In their creation of everything. They thought, hey, look, if we give Lucifer one more chance, maybe he can essentially he can do the right thing. But the thing about Lucifer is an entity who has a tremendous chip on his shoulder, and he thinks he knows better. So when Lucifer became that archangel, he was the brightest of the archangels because he was created by himself from Father with more of a piece of Father. So he wasn't created from Father in the sense that Father created him. He was created from Father in the sense that he's a piece of Father, right? So let's make that distinction really, really quick right there. He wasn't on board with the idea that everything moving towards unity and oneness, which is the plan of divinity and overall density of the universe, because he feared that this would lead to no individuality. He didn't understand that he could be one with everything, but also retain his uniqueness, right? And I'm pretty sure that this is also due to the wound at the center of his creation, or the trauma at the center of his creation. I'm going to bring it back to myself because this is something that we struggle with today, right? We struggle with this being a part of the collective, but maintaining our own individuality and seeing it as a righteous move, or a move in the right direction, but it is because even though we all come back to the collective to do what we have to do and to help each other, there is an individualistic nature to who we are as consciousness as well. And that 50-50 split is really it's really one of the greatest things ever, right? And it gives us the ability to manage the ego, right? And here's where we get into this dichotomy of self. To get rid of all of your ego is to not fulfill your fullest potential. ego is not meant to be taken away. Maybe in the higher densities it is, but residing in the third and fourth density, the ability to have that ego, but be in control of that ego is way, way better than being able to just get rid of it completely, right? That's what gives free will. And also, when we are in service to others, yet our ego is still there, we are resonating at our highest vibration because there is that ability to go towards that darker side and be of service to self, but you choose not to do that, right? We can go down a whole rabbit hole with levels of consciousness as well. And we're going to do another video on it eventually, right? But let's get back to it. So again, he didn't want to be one. He was very, very much of the individual nature and kind of rejected oneness, right? So what he actually feared was becoming one with his creator, who was Father, because it would mean having to resolve his core trauma, something that's scary to anyone, right? But to be fair, divinity didn't understand at this point the responsibility it had in forming this trauma in the first place. So the entities that created Lucifer were not aware of how hard it was for him in the very, very beginning stages of his awakening or his consciousness, right? Now, that's not giving sympathy to Lucifer. What that's saying is it's acknowledging that sometimes born of trauma, right? Trauma is a big deal, and we're all born of trauma. But we're just kind of setting precedent of the story. So it sounds as if Lucifer is misguided or not seen in a favorable light because they don't understand him completely, which it happens in society too. But it gets to the point where there's this tipping point. We're going to get there. We're on our way there now. So let's keep going. All right. So 4.5 million years ago, this conflict reached a head and erupted into the war in heaven with Lucifer, and the host of angels that he managed to persuade, about 1/3 of them. And we hear about this in the Bible. Now, again, it is reflecting context in the Bible, but we have to not put it in that container. We have to understand the symbolism of what this means, right? So on one side, we had the archangel Michael leading the rest of the heavenly forces against Lucifer. And we hear this all the time. We hear this all the time. The fall of these angels and how these angels, per se, interacted with human beings, right? But this is a little bit before that. We're going to get into it a little bit. So let's keep going. So in this moment, mother and father didn't take any sides, right? Mother and father are these entities that could have stopped this conflict at any given time, but they didn't want to take sides because both of these entities and this one side versus the other are all their creation, right? So because of the fundamental tenets of this creation is that free will and its resulting consequence must be allowed to play out, no matter how disastrous that may seem at the time. And the reason why we're going over this aspect of it is because this is the 6th and 7th density. So again, we're going to see a trickle down when we get to Maldek and Mars. And that's the real key points in what we're talking about. But long story short, I'm not going to go through the whole text and how it went down. Lucifer loses, right? He lost. And he and all those who sided with him were kicked from the 6th and 7th density, which it can be very jarring. So with Michael essentially lassoed these light bodies of the rebels and beam them through the densities, through time and space to our solar system. Now, the 5th and 6th density resides not only within our solar system, but outside of our solar system, right? It's a universal thing. And it was thought that these fallen angels could learn some valuable lessons from the limitations and solidity of the 5th density reality. So the energy beam that carried them here contained coding written and bind to the rebels to bind them to the fifth density. That was their highest ability or highest density level would be the fifth density. The beam that shot them here, or was how they were lassoed here, it was coded in that beam. So it worked with the angels, and they were locked into that fifth density. And the first they got here, they were monstrous rock creatures. They weren't even in, human form yet, right? So they come down here, and we see these elementals now becoming more prevalent in what we're talking about. This is where elementals came from. And we see this across many different cultures. And many different cultures talk about elementals and how the elementals themselves were basically fell from the sky, right? And it's pretty wild to see this. So, and again, I'm going to let everybody know after this, because we just talked about Lucifer a little bit, Omar on Watchers Talk is going to be going over Satan's or Saturn, but Satanism, Saturn, the devil, the Saturnic symbols that reside in our everyday lives, and the true symbolism of Saturn. I've seen this presentation. It is not one to be missed. It's so in depth and so deep that it'll change your perceptions on everything you see by just listening. So make sure you're tuning into that. That's on Watchers Talk. I'm going to have Omar or Sugar put that into the chat so you can go over there, subscribe, and follow up. So let's keep going here. I mean, we got a lot more to cover. So again, long story short, Lucifer gets crazy. Now it's the archangel. Now Lucifer has this ability of an archangel, right? He wasn't just Lucifer anymore. He was transformed into an archangel. So now he's possessing more energy than the lesser angels, like we talked about before. And he was able to take strength from the earth and form a shield that broke and deflected the beam with the code to keep them in the fifth density. He was able to deflect enough coding that he retained some of his physical and interdensity abilities, and he was able to manifest a body for himself and incarnate into a body, or simply exist as conscious energy, right? So because he is pretty sharp being and has seen and been around mother and father longer than most of the other beings, he was able to protect himself in the sense that he wasn't fully taken out like the lesser angels were, right? So he has since incarnated many, many times as a member of the Anunnaki, as a player in the 13 royal bloodlines, as a human, and through his myriad of trials and lessons, he has since been redeemed and exists now as a great archangel of unconditional love, a rescuer and redeemer of those unjustly banished to hell. Now, this is where things get a little bit different. People are going to say, "Oh, you're condemning, you're siding with Lucifer." No, I'm not. I'm telling you the story of what I'm looking at here, right? Now, I have to preface this that I don't agree with all this information, but I'm giving it to you to decide what you want to do with it, right? I don't agree that Lucifer is completely moved into the unconditional side. I think that there is something that still remains of him on that negative side. But we're going to go into what they think and all this collective thinks is this other side, right? So as we see, it's crazy. It's crazy, crazy, crazy. I went a little too far on the slides, but let's see. So this is kind of ironic as many people who worship Lucifer as a dark god are totally unaware that he is no longer that, and that the entity that they are actually giving their energy to is Arahim and his demon gods such as Baal, Baphomet, and Moloch. Now, I think that, and this is me saying this isn't the research now, this is me, and I'm prefacing that. I think that there is a possibility for that, but I don't see that fully being the case. I think that there is a part of Lucifer that is enamoring that worship. He is moving and basically recruiting on this side of the plane, right? And if we know from all of the stories that we've heard up to this point of who Lucifer is from this research, we see that whether he plays good or not, it's never truly for a long time. He always reverts back to that conceded service to self or chip on his shoulder. So I think that that's where he's at right now. And I think he might be playing under the guy's goodness from what people see, right? Just my opinion. But who am I, right? It's just I'm not anybody special, but I think that these entities like Baal, Baphomet, and Moloch are doing yet his bidding, but being the great deceiver that he is, he's letting people who are following him maybe follow him or worshiping these gods while still pulling the strings, but in an unmentionable way. So, but at this time, when Lucifer and his followers were banished to our system, the effect of that huge bundle of archetypal energy and having its density greatly lowered as it passed through our solar system was much like the effect of cornstarch and gravy. Our little religions of space and time, region of space and time began to thicken. And this is what paved the way for the demonic entities like the Arahim and his Azurus to penetrate our corner of the universe more intensely with their vibration, right? So the utopia of our lovely Earth and her surrounding community of peaceful planets began its long, slow descent into corruption and darkness, a low point that we are just starting to climb our way back from today. Now, this is, I think that that's pretty on point with where we're at right now, is we're slowly making our way up to back to where we used to be. But when I was reading that about, Lucifer's people are worshiping him and he's not even that person anymore, I'm like, first thought was like, what, everybody deserves second chances and redemption. But then I had to ask myself, do I really believe that? And I was like, I don't really believe that. I don't think that that's truly what I believe. But again, like I said, everybody to each their own. I'm not here to tell you it's wrong or right. So we keep going. This is where the vibration of Earth and its sister planets all around it became sickened, right? So over the course of the next 3 million years, the vibration of our solar system gradually slowed and the utopia slowly sickened. So it was during this time that a group who had a big grudge against the two most densely populated planets in our solar system, Maldek and Mars, saw their opportunity to return, right? The two most populated planets within our system at this time were Maldek and Mars. So 2.5 million years ago, the group of 13 royal bloodlines from Orion, remember we talked about them the last time, and how they set up what we know today, right, of the 13 bloodlines, the souls that were previously kicked out of our system for being too dark and violent during the time of Utopia settled on Maldek and began to influence and quicken the decline of that planet's consciousness grid, which is really, really wild, right? This is we're getting into it. So I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff now. I'm just going to leave some pictures up because I didn't really space all this out with pictures because it's more about what you're hearing and not what you're seeing. That planet's people who were already on the downward slide and many of whom were from the defeated reptoid lineage who had fled there from Earth long ago, were easily seduced by the dark men from Orion and quickly embraced their ideals of service to self, technology, and control, giving up their freedom in an attempt to gain some sense of power over their deteriorating circumstances. But the yearning for that type of power and control is a vicious cycle that leads to wanting more. And I'm going to bring it back to me just for a minute. This is a warning, right? This is a warning. This is what we're going through today. There's so much negative that when we're looking at it and we're trying to stay within the positive, the circumstances around us become heavy and thick, and people become they feel despair. And this is where being able to find your place and empowering yourself with information, but also meditation and finding your own road, that outward stimuli that's coming in and trying to switch you to that negative sense, it holds no bearing. It holds no bearing. And this is sort of similar to what we're seeing today on a specific scale, right? And Omar, you're special to me too, brother, for sure. And, this is very indicative of the times that we're kind of going through. We're watching these Satanists and devils incarnate essentially do these sick and evil things, and people are complacent and don't call them out. Now, some do, but most don't. Most of the time, if this was millions of years ago, if we were in that utopia, when people saw that stuff, they handled it immediately, or they took care of it. Now we sit back and say, "Hey, let everybody do what they want to do," blah, blah, blah. It's not we have to empower people to take their stands, right? And to do what they need to do so that we don't repeat these same mistakes. So let's keep going a little bit. And this is where we're getting into these blinds, right? So it's a vicious cycle. They started to become belligerent and then downright threatening towards their peaceful Martian neighbors, eventually insisting that Mars surrender its territory to the Maldekian control voluntarily, or they would be conquered and colonized and possibly wiped out. Some of the citizens of Mars appealed to their relatives in the Pleiades for aid, and the Pleiadians answered by sending a fleet of ships to help out. Ironically, Maldek took the arrival of the Pleiadian fleet, which is what we're talking about here. I think I missed a couple of things here. I don't know if I'm missing slides or whatever, but I think I missed a few slides with the Pleiadians, but no worries. So the Maldekians arrived and they saw this Palladian fleet as provocation and used it to justify an attack on Mars. They used electromagnetic gravitic technology, essentially a tech generated from Merkaba fields, right? The Maldekians created an energy grid around their planet that could be used as both a shield and as a weapon against the Martians' natural, created solely with group consciousness, Merkaba shield. By using this weapon, Maldek was able to disrupt the Martian energy grid long enough to bombard the planet with poisonous chemical bombs, causing chain reactions in the atmosphere that turned the air into toxic fumes. This happened very rapidly, and most of the Martians died before they knew what hit them. Many of these souls returned to Sirius and the Pleiades, while others were too traumatized to access that vibration hovered around Earth, waiting to incarnate. Most evolved Martians, the most evolved Martians, a group made up mostly of those original souls who had settled on Mars during the Orion Wars, were able to escape in their light bodies. Remember, this is the between 5th and 7th density civilizations. These are not civilizations in the 3D like we know. While they can go down into 3D and affect their surroundings, they're not doing it often or even staying in that situation because they don't want to and they can't for very long, right? So this is where things in our universe become, again, very traumatic and very warlike. And people are, entities are devastated. And it's wild what happens now. So let's keep going because this gets really crazy, right? So in relation, the Palladian fleet surrounded Maldek and bombarded it with energy beams that began to destabilize the Maldek energy shield. Panicking, the Orion leaders of Maldek cranked up their power grid in an attempt to take out the entire Palladian fleet in one big energy burst. But the plan backfired. Passing an increased current through the damaged tech-based energy field destabilized the natural electromagnetic gravitic grid of this planet so that Maldek was literally shattered into bits. It was shattered into bits and became the asteroid belt now located between Mars and Jupiter, right? So this Maldek was close to Mars. We know that. And now this is that asteroid belt. And what happens now is incredible. It's incredible because it makes so much sense when you hear it, right? This planet was literally just decimated. And this happens a lot. It seems like a pattern in not just our universe, but the whole galaxy, right? And now, not only did the Martians get wiped out, most of them anyway, the Maldekians were wiped out too. So nobody actually won this war. This was literally just devastation of two planets, and all that was left was carnage, right? It goes to show that war doesn't always breed a victor. And we have to understand that. We have to keep that in mind. Mutually assured destruction is not the way to go. It's not the way to go. We hear that being talked about in mainstream media now, mutually assured destruction. Screw all that. I don't want any part of that. I want to ascend. I want to awaken others. That's what we want. Fighting is never leads to good things, right? We got to be careful out there. We got to maintain our egos, right? So the very souls of the deceased inhabitants of Maldek were shattered, as well as the trauma of their entire planet being suddenly ripped apart. Each soul there was shredded into many soul fragments, each still capable of consciousness, but with a fraction of the energy of their original selves. They flood to Earth now, the safest, most habitable or hospitable planet in the system, and join the souls of the Martians there, hovering around the planet in a great cloud of soul families, waiting to incarnate. And many of the people on Earth now were a part of this group. So, seconds before the planet was torn apart, the group of the 13 royal bloodlines who made up the leadership of the Orion faction and who were well prepared for just such an eventuality managed to escape into space-time using their electromagnetic gravitic technology. They traveled in 3 gigantic disc-shaped motherships, battered and damaged from the wars, to a place in time where they saw it would be both possible and advantageous to manifest. So they went to Atlantis, approximately 52,000 years before our present day. So they essentially went from 2,000 years to 52,000 years. These people are not constrained by what we see as time. They maneuver within and out that of what we know is time, right? With that being said, let's keep going. Let's keep it moving. So now the Pleiadians, though, saw that they were up to what these 13 bloodlines were going to be doing, or what they were trying to do. They were too battered and weary from the war, though, and were not able or inclined to pursue them through space time. So they came up with another solution. They imposed an artificial third density matrix onto the planet by setting up an advanced digital computer system powered by 12 nuclear generators in the spaceship we call the moon, right? Which projected a holographic egg-shaped matrix around Earth. This third density that we are still living in today is superimposed holographic overlay on a 5D Earth, a lower frequency caricature of 5D reality. Now, this is where it's pretty family. It's pretty ridiculous. This is pretty wild, right? We think about this matrix, and we always talk about the matrix. I said family because I'm reading the chats as we go, but this matrix now is superimposed on us, and we see that we are trying to break this paradigm, right? And the moon is such that place. Now, this technology can be accessed through consciousness. It doesn't have to be, where we blow the moon up and then boom, here goes the hologram. Well, it's been here for so long now that it's more than just that. It's more than just that. So now you're wondering, how can a holographic projection keep anyone trapped? But it's so because these holograms are not just light. They are also powerful, and that they form an electromagnetic force field, aka the Van Allen belt, which we know is very difficult to pass through to get to space, that you cannot pass through that force field without technology that can manipulate frequency, or by developing your consciousness enough that you can raise your physical vibration to match the 5D frequency. Now you see how that makes sense, right? You can't leave it unless you match it, right? We also know that NASA, never a straight answer, keeps saying that they've gone to space, but everything that they've put forward has been computer generated and or studio recorded, right? We know that. We've seen it. We see mice and all these glitches that they try and put when they put this stuff out. So have they truly gone past that Van Allen belt? And if so, who was on board that ship that got them past it? Would be the real question. Now, that's only if they went that far. Who knows if they did? Let's keep going. So, again, they went to Atlantis. I wasn't hitting the slides, so I apologize, but all these nasty beings are taking up residence in our solar system, and it's getting crazy, right? So the Pleiadians looked down the timeline and saw that this third density matrix would already be in place when the Orion group emerged from space-time in their damaged ships with further damaged equipment, to the point that they were lost to the technology to manipulate the frequency, and their consciousness was not sufficiently evolved to access that frequency without technology assistance. So therefore, the Orion would be trapped on third density Earth and would not be able to escape. So they trapped these 13 Orion bloodlines on Earth, right? And here's this is where things get a little bit wild, right? They're already here. So space-time is not fluid as regular time. Space-time means that they could pretty much travel in and out of timelines, right? But if that's the case, can't they pick a timeline? Well, not now, but before, that was different than being trapped in that 3D matrix, you would think. Maybe their technology couldn't get them there. Who knows? But that's a question I have for people out there. So whatever the case is, but the way the Pleiadians figured they could take their time, go home, recover, and check back on the situation later. This third density matrix also added the benefit of more closely matching the frequency of the traumatized souls of Maldek and Mars, who were hovering around Earth waiting to incarnate. Right? Wild. Just take a breath for a second. There's a lot there. We're talking about incarnation on this planet. And if you notice what they said before, they said that your soul family that's incarnated around you is essentially a piece of you. It's a piece of your Maldekian or Martian self, whatever your, or, which are basically the Palladians and Patels. And because of that destruction and trauma, your higher self, I guess we could say, fragmented across time and space. And each one of those fragments had a consciousness. So your soul family that is part of those fragmented consciousnesses that come off of your original higher self, which to me is like, whoa, that's crazy. That's pretty wild, right? I think so. I think so. Let's keep going. So the 13 royal bloodlines from Orion have played a major role in our planet's history ever since that time. They eventually joined with the Dracos, who have been hibernating underground, and together, all along with the so-called Illuminati and certain German political parties, which will not be named here, they would meet much later on. They would form the core of the group that today we call the Cabal. These dark men from Orion, these 13 bloodlines, all had elongated skulls, which you see appear predominantly in Egyptian and other post-flood cultures. This group and their elongated skulls can be traced to the Roman Empire, the Vatican, the European royalty, and many of whom had elongated skulls though over time their skulls have gotten similar to ours in the physiology, and this is because of the adapted to the energy and the gravity and the DNA of this planet. So some of the Palladians have since regretted their part in the destruction of Maldek and have been trying to help us out since then, resulting in the many present-day channelers and people who are in contact who speak for these different beings out there, and the many starseeds from those who chose to incarnate on this earth. The positive faction of Pleiadians are also part of the efforts currently underway to move us out of that third density matrix, though most are not aware of the necessary role that the third density plays in allowing us to interface with Mother, and that process cannot be rushed. So we must bring all those lost pieces of the Mother with us into the fifth density in order for any evolution or ascension process to integrate and stick. So for more, we have to really dive into the wound of Mother and the connection between Mother and Father. But this is something that we saw predominantly in our religious texts, is they used the masculine but eliminated the feminine. And I think there was reason for that. And we just see that these 13 bloodlines infiltrated a lot of these top tier institutions, especially the ones that write these religious texts. So, it leads me to believe that a lot of these religious texts, especially after what we talked about earlier in this show, are all hand-me-down stories of things that happen around our solar system. Really. We talked about Merlin. We talked about all these different people and all these different entities that can be lined up with comparative mythology, which is truly incredible. But we still have a little bit more left to go. So 2.5 million years ago, we're going back there, was in trouble, right? As the low vibe that now permeated our solar system, and this is where we get to the next part, it permeated our solar system, this vibe, right? So we get to it, and basically this is where all the nasty beings ended up taking residence, like we just saw. And the Earth had been designated a living library, which we talked about in the last episode, home to flora and fauna from across the galaxy. But that's not the only thing that makes it special. The spirit of Earth is the largest, most sentient piece of the lost original Mother. Because of this, our little blue planet is an energetic linchpin for all of creation. So there are very real reasons for concern of the higher forces of light. This is also an arc planet, and any genetic code is adapted into this planet so it can be retracted if anything is to happen to specific species around the galaxy, right? This is an arc planet. It's the hospital. It's where entities come to train from third density and up. It's a place where we move into our truest potential. So Sanat Kumara, the leader of the 144,000 Knuckles, who were still in residence on the fifth density Venus, decided it was time to return to Earth for a while and help stabilize the situation. He traveled here with 400 of his people, and together they manifested a fifth density city above the Gobi Sea, which is now the Gobi Desert. This city would become known as the White City, Shambhala. Once Shambhala was established, the rest of the Knuckles made their trip from Venus and took up residency. Foreseeing that they would be involved with nurturing all forms of life on the planet for a long time to come, Sanat Kumara decided that a fourth density city should be constructed underground, directly below Shambhala. So a portion of the Knuckles manifested some 4D bodies so that they could interface with fourth density reality on Earth and begin construction of lower Shambhala. Now, this is where we see a lot of these entities are going back into the ground, right? So the group of humans from the Pleiades who settled here about 17.5 million years ago and who were also living at the fourth density, most of Agartha is fourth density territory, had already established a city underground and welcomed the Knuckles and also assisted them with construction. So then the Knuckles began the real work. Together with the Pleiadian group and the more highly evolved Martians who had escaped the destruction of their planet's atmosphere in their light bodies, they began helping the traumatized souls of all those who perished in the Maldek Mars War, who were hovering around Earth in the great cloud awaiting incarnation. These poor souls were so traumatized and fragmented, they had lost all of their psychic abilities and Akashic memory, and were barely sentient. They incarnated into the third density matrix as primitive hominids, the genus we know as Homo habilis. The active DNA was reduced to 2 strands, with 10 other strands existing only as potential. So Homo habilis is what you see right in front of you right now, right? This is what they were incarnating into, and they were also in the third density. So let's keep it going. Let's keep it moving. The different soul families, and each of us was compromised of shards from a previously intact single soul, incarnated into different tribes. Essentially, one tribe equaled one soul family, equals one shattered Maldekian or Martian soul. So each tribe represented one Maldekian or Martian soul, period. But it was fragmented, all these different beings, right? All these different Homo habilises. So to this day, many of the souls who inhabit the earth are from this group. And while some have evolved and healed over time, regaining much of their former spiritual prowess, others have not and are still barely above their ancient hominid ancestors in terms of consciousness. The reason that our fossil record shows so many different species of genus Homo subsequently appearing and disappearing throughout the millions of years that follow this time is because of both evolution and continued genetic manipulation by the Knuckles, as well as many other groups. In fact, descendants from these tribes would eventually be altered into Homo sapiens by the Anunnaki about 2 million years after the introduction of Homo habilis. And this is where we get to even more. There's so much more to go, right? As we get this is what we have today, and it's pretty much all of it for right now. But it's pretty wild because now we're getting into see spirituality and evolution come into play. And I'll give you a little tidbit of what's to come the next time we talk about this. So the next time we talk about this, and we're going to get into a lot of really crazy stuff, like I said, is origins, war, peace, and Nibiru. If that gives you any indication of where this is starting to go. You know, we talked about the birth of the Anunnaki for a solution of a war, who then became a thorn in the side of many other different entities when it was going on through the last war that they had before the war in heaven. But so, you know, now's the time when a little bit at the end of each show, just to kind of hear your thoughts on what you just heard, and if it impacted you in a different way than it did me, and I want to see your perspective. So please, if you've gotten this far, leave a comment below after it's over, because it also helps the algorithm and push it forward. And don't forget, Watchers Talk, I believe it starts at 8:20 Eastern time, is going for broke when he talks about all things Saturn. He's got so much information that I'm sure of it. It's going to be a multi-part series just like this. But this is what we do best, is giving the information out, and you decide what to do with it. I'm excited to watch it. I can't wait to hear what Omar's going to say. And it's over at Watchers Talk. Make sure you come from here and go straight there, because what you heard here is only a preface to what you're going to hear over there. He's going to go into a much larger description of the 13 bloodlines, of the Satanist and Luciferian type of entities that reside on this planet, but also how it works into everyday life right now. So make sure you do that. Make sure everybody goes right over there. Omar, put that link to that episode in the chat so everybody can just jump right over there after we finish here. And I'm going to wait a second for you to do that. I just want to thank everybody for, coming through this journey with me. Again, this has been so eye-opening. It's been so amazing to see where we came from, right? Or to an understanding of where we came from, because a man or woman lost or a man or woman who doesn't know where they come from is a man or woman lost. And our ultimate goal is to figure all that stuff out and find our truest potential. So, leave the comment below. Help push this to the top of the algorithm. Let's get everybody involved. Share this out if you haven't, because who knows? Maybe something within this, because it was so heavy on the Christian mythology side, or the similarities between it, maybe this is that branch that'll wake specific people up who are super indoctrinated by the Vatican and things like that. So, let's figure this out. Let's keep going. We got a lot more to go over. So with that being said, my name is Rob Yox. This has been part 6, I believe. Part 7 is coming. I told you, I've got so much of this. They're probably going to go like 15 episodes into it. But with that being said, my name is Rob Yox. This is Full Spectrum Universe. Thank you, everybody. Remember, like, share, subscribe, leave a comment below. I know it's asking a lot. And if you want to donate, the PayPal is in the chat. We are completely listener funded. And, anything you could do to help out, to push this forward, to help, everything we make there will be used to create more for the people out there. So with that being said, I hope everybody has a great night. I hope this found you with love and abundance. And I wish all of you the best. I hope all of you are on that path to awakening, and your consciousness is being tintillated by this information. And I hope everybody just has an amazing weekend. We'll be back probably Sunday night. We're going to go way deep again, and we'll talk to you all very, very soon. Thank you all. Have a great evening.